Imagine the Caribbean Sea in 1715. Pull back across the deep blue water, past the scattered chain of islands stretching from Cuba down to Trinidad. Zoom in on the port of Nassau in the Bahamas, where dozens of ships sit anchored in the harbor, their masts like a forest of stripped trees. Pan south across the water to Port Royal, Jamaica, once called the wickedest city on earth, where taverns outnumber churches 20-1. Drift further east to the sugar plantations of Barbados, where fields of tall green cane stretch for miles under a brutal sun. Then sweep west to the Spanish Main, the coastline of Central and South America, where galleons loaded with gold and silver crawl through pirate-infested waters. Every single one of these places has something in common, and it is not gold, it is not gunpowder, it is not even ships, it is rum. The same liquid that kept sailors from dying of thirst on months-long voyages. The same drink that gave pirates the courage to charge into cannon fire. The same substance that turned disciplined crews into raging animals who burned entire towns to the ground. Rum did not just fuel the Golden Age of Piracy. Rum created it. And by the time the age was over, rum had left a trail of blood, madness, and empire that stretched across the entire Atlantic world. This is the story of how a cheap sugarcane byproduct became the most dangerous drink in maritime history. To understand how rum conquered the pirate world, you need to understand what the Caribbean looked like in the 1600s. Because rum did not start as a pirate drink, it started as a waste product. When European colonizers arrived in the Caribbean, they brought sugarcane with them. Sugar was incredibly valuable in Europe. It was more expensive than most spices, and demand was growing every year. So the colonial powers, particularly England, France, Spain, and the Netherlands, set up massive sugar plantations across the islands. Barbados, Jamaica, Martinique, Guadeloupe, St. Kitts, Antigua. The entire Caribbean was essentially converted into a sugar factory. But here is the thing about making sugar. The process of refining sugarcane into crystallized sugar produces an enormous amount of leftover liquid, a thick, dark, sticky substance called molasses. And in the early days, nobody knew what to do with it. Planters had mountains of the stuff piling up. It was too heavy to ship back to Europe profitably. It attracted insects. It rotted in the heat. Most planters considered it garbage. Then somebody, and historians still argue about exactly who and when, figured out that if you fermented molasses with water and then distilled the result, you got alcohol. Strong alcohol. The kind that burned going down and hit your bloodstream like a cannonball. The earliest versions were brutal. Plantation workers in Barbados called it kill devil because it was so harsh that drinking it felt like fighting Satan himself. A visitor to Barbados in 1651 described it as a hot, hellish, and terrible liquor. Another account from around the same period said it was made from the skimmings of sugar pots and was strong enough to strip paint. But it was cheap, incredibly cheap. Molasses was free, or nearly free. The distillation process was simple. You did not need fancy equipment or years of aging. You could go from raw molasses to drinkable spirits in a matter of days. And in the Caribbean, where clean drinking water was scarce and European beer and wine spoiled quickly in the tropical heat, having a cheap source of alcohol was not a luxury. It was a survival tool. This is the part most people miss when they think about rum and pirates. They picture Captain Jack Sparrow stumbling around drunk for laughs. But the reality was far more practical and far more grim. Water was the single biggest logistical problem in the age of sail. A ship carrying 100 men needed enormous quantities of fresh water, and there was no way to keep it fresh. Water was stored in wooden barrels, and within weeks of leaving port, it turned green. Algae grew in it, bacteria multiplied. The water became slimy, foul-smelling, and genuinely dangerous to drink. Dysentery, typhoid, and cholera killed more sailors than combat ever did. Alcohol solved this problem in two ways. First, the alcohol itself acted as a mild preservative. Rum, stored in barrels, lasted far longer than water without becoming toxic. Second, when you mixed rum with bad water, the alcohol killed at least some of the bacteria, making the water less likely to make you sick. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. But in an era before germ theory, before water purification, before anyone understood why stored water made people ill, rum was the closest thing to a medical solution that existed. The Royal Navy figured this out early. In 1655, when the English captured Jamaica from Spain, Vice Admiral William Penn, father of the man who would later found Pennsylvania, made a decision that would shape naval history for the next 3 centuries. He switched the official daily ration for sailors from French brandy to Jamaican rum. The reasoning was simple. Jamaica was now English territory. Jamaican rum was cheap and abundant. French brandy had to be imported from an enemy nation. Why pay for expensive foreign liquor when your own colony produced barrels of the stuff for almost nothing? That single decision turned rum into the official drink of the most powerful navy on Earth. Every British sailor, from the lowest deckhand to the officers, received a daily ration of rum, half a pint per day, which is a staggering amount of hard liquor by modern standards. The ration was eventually mixed with water and lime juice to create what became known as grog, a word that entered the English language and never left. Now, pirates were not the Royal Navy. Pirates did not follow regulations or answer to admirals. But most pirates were former naval sailors, former merchant seamen, or former privateers. They came from the same world, they knew the same traditions, and when they went on the account, which was the period term for turning pirate, they brought their drinking habits with them. But there was one critical difference. In the Navy, rum rations were controlled. An officer measured them out. There were rules, at least in theory, about when and how much you could drink. On a pirate ship, those rules largely disappeared. Pirates were democratic in ways that horrified the establishment. Crews voted on their captains. They drew up articles of agreement that every man signed. And when it came to rum, the general philosophy was simple. Everyone drinks. Everyone drinks as much as they want, and nobody tells anyone else to stop. This created a culture of drinking that went far beyond anything happening on legitimate ships. Pirates did not just drink rum, they practically worshipped it. Rum was currency, medicine, recreation, and religion all rolled into one. When a pirate crew captured a merchant ship, the first thing they looked for, before gold, before weapons, before navigation instruments, was the liquor supply. Multiple first-hand accounts from the Golden Age of Piracy describe pirates breaking open cargo holds and drinking themselves unconscious while enemy ships escaped or while their own vessel drifted into dangerous waters. Captain Charles Johnson, whose 1724 book, A General History of the Pirates, remains one of the most important sources on pirate life, describes scene after scene of pirates choosing rum over tactical advantage. One crew reportedly captured a ship carrying a fortune in silks and spices, but ignored the cargo entirely in favor of several barrels of rum they found in the hold. They drank for 3 days straight while the valuable cargo sat untouched. And this is where the story of rum and pirates takes its darker turn. Because rum did not just keep pirates alive, it also destroyed them. Systematically, predictably, and violently. The connection between rum and pirate violence is not romantic. It is clinical. Alcohol lowers inhibition. It impairs judgment. It increases aggression. And when you combine heavy drinking with men who already lived outside the law, who carried weapons at all times, and who operated in an environment with minimal consequences for violence, the results were catastrophic. Consider the career of Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. Blackbeard is the most famous pirate in history, and nearly every account of his behavior mentions alcohol. According to multiple sources, Blackbeard drank constantly and heavily. He mixed rum with gunpowder and drank it as a show of dominance. He once shot his own first mate, Israel Hands, under the table during a drinking session, crippling him for life. When asked why he did it, Blackbeard reportedly said, that if he did not shoot one of his men now and then, they would forget who he was. That story might be embellished. Many pirate stories are. But the pattern it describes, heavy drinking leading to random violence, is confirmed across dozens of sources from the period. Pirates routinely fought each other while drunk. They accidentally discharged weapons. They fell overboard. They made disastrous tactical decisions because their captain or quartermaster was too intoxicated to think clearly. The pirate crew of Charles Vane, one of the most feared captains in the Caribbean during the early 1700s, essentially self-destructed because of alcohol. Vane's men spent so much time drunk that they repeatedly failed to capture prizes that should have been easy targets. When the crew finally voted Vane out as captain, replacing him with his quartermaster Jack Rackham, one of the primary complaints was that Vane's leadership had become erratic and unpredictable, behaviors that multiple accounts attribute at least partially to his drinking. Bartholomew Roberts, known as Black Bart, was one of the few pirate captains who recognized this problem and tried to do something about it. Roberts was unusual among pirates in many ways. He preferred tea to rum, dressed in elaborate silk clothing, and insisted on strict discipline aboard his ships. His Articles of Agreement, the pirate code that every crew member signed, included specific rules about drinking. Lights and candles had to be out by 8 o'clock at night. If any man wanted to drink after that hour, he had to do it on the open deck, where his behavior could be monitored. Roberts understood that a drunk crew was a dead crew, and Roberts was right. His career lasted longer and was more successful than almost any other pirate of the Golden Age. He captured over 400 ships. He terrorized shipping lanes from the Caribbean to West Africa. And he maintained discipline in a profession where discipline was almost non-existent. Was it entirely because he controlled his crew's drinking? No. But multiple historians have argued that his strict alcohol policies were a significant factor in his effectiveness. Compare that to the fate of someone like Stede Bonnet, the gentleman pirate. Bonnet was a wealthy Barbados plantation owner who inexplicably abandoned his comfortable life to become a pirate. By all accounts, he was terrible at it. He knew nothing about sailing or naval combat. And multiple sources suggest that he relied heavily on rum to cope with the stress and fear of his new career. His judgment deteriorated. His crew lost confidence in him. He was eventually captured, tried, and hanged in Charleston, South Carolina in 1718. The court records describe a man who appeared confused and broken, a far cry from the wealthy gentleman who had set out to sea just 2 years earlier. But rum's role in pirate culture went beyond individual stories of violence and self-destruction. Rum was actually a structural element of how pirate economies and societies functioned. When pirates captured a ship, the distribution of plunder followed specific rules laid out in the ship's articles. The captain received a larger share than regular crew members. The quartermaster, who served as a kind of union representative for the crew, also received a bonus. Skilled positions like the ship's surgeon, the navigator, and the master gunner earned extra. But regardless of how the gold, silver, and trade goods were divided, rum was almost always shared equally among the entire crew. It was considered a basic right, something every pirate was entitled to regardless of rank. This made rum one of the most democratizing forces in pirate life. A common sailor who might receive 1 share of gold to the captain's 2 shares still drank the same rum in the same quantity. In a world defined by brutal inequality, where the plantation system that produced rum was built entirely on enslaved labor, this equal distribution of alcohol among the crew was one of the few genuinely egalitarian practices pirates maintained. Rum also served as currency in the pirate world. Throughout the Caribbean and along the American coastline, rum could be traded for anything: food, weapons, ship repairs, information, safe harbor. Corrupt colonial officials accepted bribes in rum. Merchants who would never openly deal with pirates were happy to trade supplies for barrels of spirits, no questions asked. In some ports, rum was more reliable than actual money because its value was consistent and universally recognized. Everyone wanted rum, everyone needed rum, and pirates always had rum. There is a specific drink that captures the intersection of rum and pirate culture better than anything else, and that is bumbo. Bumbo, sometimes spelled bombo, was a pirate cocktail made from rum, water, sugar, and nutmeg. It was essentially a sweetened, spiced version of Navy grog, and it was consumed in enormous quantities across the Caribbean. Bumbo was the drink of choice in pirate taverns from Nassau to Port Royal to Tortuga. It was what pirates drank when they came ashore with pockets full of stolen gold and a desperate need to forget what they had done and what was likely coming for them. The taverns of Nassau during the Pirate Republic era, roughly 1706 to 1718, were legendary for their consumption of rum and bumbo. Nassau was effectively governed by pirates during this period. There was no real colonial authority. The pirates elected their own leaders, enforced their own laws, and spent their money however they wanted. And what they wanted, overwhelmingly, was to drink. Contemporary accounts describe Nassau as a place where pirates stumbled through the streets at all hours, where fights broke out constantly, where men drank until they collapsed, and then woke up and started drinking again. The economy of Nassau was built almost entirely on the pirate trade, and the largest sector of that economy was the sale of rum and other alcoholic beverages. Tavern owners made fortunes. Distillers could barely keep up with demand. When Woodes Rogers arrived in Nassau in 1718 as the new royal governor, tasked with cleaning up the pirate haven and restoring order, one of the first things he noted was the astonishing amount of alcohol consumption. Rogers offered pardons to any pirate who would surrender and give up the life. Many accepted, but even after the pardons, the drinking continued. Rogers wrote that the former pirates were orderly enough when sober but became savage when drunk, which was most of the time. The connection between rum and piracy also had a geographic dimension that is easy to overlook. The Caribbean was the epicenter of both the rum trade and the pirate trade, and this was not a coincidence. The same trade routes that carried sugar and molasses from Caribbean plantations to distilleries in New England and Europe also carried finished goods, weapons, and supplies back to the islands. These trade routes were the highways of the colonial economy, and pirates positioned themselves along these highways like toll collectors, intercepting ships and helping themselves to whatever they carried. Rum ships were particularly attractive targets because the cargo was immediately useful. If you captured a ship carrying silk or porcelain, you needed to find a buyer. You needed a fence, a corrupt merchant, a friendly port where you could sell stolen goods without getting arrested. That took time and carried risk. But if you captured a ship carrying rum, you could use the cargo yourself. Your crew was happy, morale was high, and whatever you did not drink, you could trade easily at the next port. This created a feedback loop. Pirates captured rum ships. The rum kept their crews happy and functional. Happy, functional crews were better at capturing more ships. More captured ships meant more rum. And so the cycle continued, fueling pirate operations across the Caribbean and beyond. But there is an even darker layer to this story. The rum that pirates drank so freely was produced by enslaved people. The entire sugar and rum economy of the Caribbean was built on the transatlantic slave trade. Enslaved Africans were brought to the islands by the hundreds of thousands to work the sugar plantations. They planted the cane, harvested it, processed it, and operated the distilleries. The work was brutal and deadly. Life expectancy for enslaved workers on Caribbean sugar plantations was shockingly low. Many did not survive more than a few years. Rum was, in fact, one of the key commodities in the triangular trade that connected Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Ships carried manufactured goods from Europe to West Africa, where they were traded for enslaved people. The enslaved people were transported across the Atlantic to the Caribbean, where they were sold to plantation owners. The plantations produced sugar and rum, which were shipped back to Europe and to the American colonies, completing the triangle. When pirates drank rum, they were consuming a product soaked in human suffering. Some historians have noted the irony that pirates, who often portrayed themselves as free men escaping the tyranny of legitimate society, were entirely dependent on an economic system built on the most extreme form of human bondage. The freedom pirates celebrated with every drink was made possible by the enslavement of others. This is not to suggest that pirates had any particular moral awareness about this contradiction. Most did not. But some pirate crews did include formerly enslaved people who had escaped or been freed during ship captures. The relationship between pirates and the institution of slavery was complicated. Some pirates freed enslaved people they encountered. Others sold them for profit. And all of them drank the rum that slavery produced without a second thought. Moving beyond the economics, rum also played a fascinating role in the rituals and social customs of pirate life. Pirates had their own culture, their own traditions, and rum was at the center of nearly all of them. When a new crew member was brought aboard, whether voluntarily or by force, the initiation often involved drinking. The new recruit would be expected to drink with the crew as a sign of acceptance and solidarity. Refusing to drink was seen as an insult, a rejection of the crew's brotherhood. In a world where trust between men was literally a matter of life and death, sharing rum was a bonding ritual with real significance. Before battle, many pirate crews drank together. This was partly for courage, the liquid variety. Facing cannon fire, musket balls, and sword combat was terrifying, and rum dulled the fear. But it was also a communal act. Drinking together before a fight reinforced the idea that every man was in this together, that they would fight for each other, that no one would run. After a successful capture, the drinking was celebratory and often extreme. Multiple accounts describe pirates consuming so much rum after a prize that they were unable to sail their own ship for days afterward. In some cases, captive crews from the captured vessel were forced to sail both ships while the pirates recovered from their binge. Rum even played a role in pirate justice. When a crew member was accused of violating the ship's articles, the trial and punishment were often conducted with rum flowing freely. The accused would be given a drink before his sentence was carried out. If the punishment was marooning, being left on a deserted island, the condemned man was traditionally given a pistol, a bottle of water, and a bottle of rum. The rum was not generosity, it was cruelty. A man stranded on a deserted island with a bottle of rum would drink it, and then face the full horror of his situation sober and alone. The pirate tradition of rum also influenced the way pirates died. Captured pirates awaiting execution were typically held in jails near the waterfront. In many cases, they were given as much rum as they wanted in the days leading up to their hanging. This was partly practical. Drunk prisoners were easier to manage than sober, terrified ones, but it was also a form of dark mercy. If you were going to hang, you might as well be drunk when it happened. There are recorded instances of pirates walking to the gallows visibly intoxicated. Some gave defiant speeches, others could barely stand. The pirate William Fly, executed in Boston in 1726, reportedly cursed the executioner and the crowd while swaying on his feet from drink. Calico Jack Rackham, one of the most famous pirates of the era, was supposedly drunk when he was captured and drunk again when he was hanged in Port Royal. The connection between rum and pirate violence reached its most extreme expression in the practice known as going on the account drunk. There were documented instances of entire pirate crews attacking towns, fortifications, and convoys while heavily intoxicated. The buccaneers of the 1660s and 1670s, predecessors of the later Golden Age pirates, were particularly notorious for this. Henry Morgan, the Welsh privateer turned pirate who became one of the most famous figures in Caribbean history, led some of his most brutal raids with crews that were drinking throughout the entire operation. His attack on Panama City in 1671, which resulted in the destruction of one of the wealthiest cities in the Americas, was accompanied by such excessive drinking that Morgan struggled to maintain any kind of tactical discipline. Soldiers and buccaneers broke into wine cellars and rum stores during the battle, and the aftermath was a days-long orgy of drinking and violence that shocked even the era's relaxed standards. Morgan's raid on Portobello in 1668 followed a similar pattern. After capturing the fortified city through a combination of surprise and brutality, Morgan's men proceeded to drink everything they could find. The occupation of Portobello lasted 2 weeks, during which the buccaneers consumed such staggering quantities of alcohol that when they finally left, many had to be carried to their ships. The irony is that rum, the substance that made pirates brave enough to attack and strong enough to endure, was also the substance that made them careless enough to get caught. The Golden Age of Piracy did not end because navies suddenly became more powerful or because trade routes became better defended. It ended largely because colonial governments got serious about enforcement, and enforcement was easiest when your targets were drunk. Pirate crews were at their most vulnerable in port, and they were almost always drunk in port. Surprise raids on pirate taverns and hideouts captured dozens of pirates at a time. Ships that should have been able to escape pursuing naval vessels were caught because their crews were too intoxicated to sail properly. Lookouts who should have spotted approaching warships were asleep or drunk. Again and again, the historical record shows pirates being captured not through brilliant naval tactics, but through their own alcohol-fueled carelessness. The case of Blackbeard's death is perhaps the most famous example. When Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the Royal Navy found Blackbeard anchored at Ocracoke Island in November 1718, Blackbeard's crew had been drinking and partying the night before. Multiple accounts suggest that when Maynard attacked at dawn, many of Blackbeard's men were hungover or still drunk. The battle was vicious and bloody, but it was shorter than it should have been. Blackbeard himself reportedly fought with his usual ferocity, sustaining 5 gunshot wounds and 20 sword cuts before finally dying. But his crew's impaired state made the fight more lopsided than it otherwise would have been. Rum outlasted the pirates who loved it. Long after the Golden Age ended, long after the last pirate crews were hunted down, captured, and executed, rum remained the drink of the sea. The Royal Navy continued issuing rum rations to sailors until 1970, an unbroken tradition spanning over 300 years. The final day of rum rations in the British Navy, July 31st, 1970, became known as Black Tot Day. Sailors wore black armbands. Some held mock funerals for the rum barrel. The tradition that started when Vice Admiral Penn switched from brandy to rum in Jamaica in 1655 finally ended in the second half of the 20th century. But the cultural legacy of pirate rum runs deeper than naval traditions. The association between pirates and rum has become so deeply embedded in popular culture that it is essentially inseparable. When Robert Louis Stevenson wrote Treasure Island in 1883, he included the sea shanty, 15 Men on the Dead Man's Chest, with its famous chorus, "Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum." Stevenson was writing nearly 200 years after the Golden Age of Piracy, but he understood that rum was not just a detail of pirate life. It was the detail, the one thing that everyone associated with the pirate experience. Every pirate movie, every pirate novel, every pirate Halloween costume comes with an implicit understanding that pirates drank rum, and they drank a lot of it. The Disney film franchise, built around the character of Captain Jack Sparrow, famously made rum central to the character's identity. "Why is the rum always gone?" became one of the most quoted lines in modern film. The line works because it taps into something the audience already knows. Pirates and rum are inseparable. But what popular culture gets wrong is the tone. Modern pirate stories treat rum as funny. It is the source of slapstick comedy, of lovable drunkenness, of carefree adventure. The reality was nothing like that. Rum in the pirate world was a survival necessity that became an addiction, that became a death sentence. It kept men alive on voyages that would have killed them without it. It gave them courage to face situations that no sane person would volunteer for. And then it destroyed their judgment, their health, their relationships with each other, and ultimately their freedom. The story of rum and piracy is the story of the entire colonial Caribbean compressed into a single liquid. It contains within it the brutality of the plantation system, the desperation of men living outside the law, the economics of global trade, the psychology of addiction, and the violence of an era when the rules of civilization dissolved once you left sight of land. Every barrel of rum that crossed the Caribbean carried all of that with it. The sugar that made it was harvested by enslaved hands. The molasses it came from was considered garbage by the wealthy planters who profited from it. The drink itself was rough enough to make grown men weep. And the men who drank it were running from something, whether it was poverty, the law, the Navy, or their own pasts. Rum did not judge them. Rum just burned going down and made the world feel smaller and more manageable for a few hours. And then the sun came up, and the headache hit, and the ship still needed sailing, and the enemy was still out there, and the rope was still waiting in some port down the line. But for one night, anchored off some unnamed island with stolen gold in the hold and a cup of kill devil in hand, none of that mattered. That was the real promise of rum. Not freedom, not courage, not brotherhood, forgetfulness. And in the end, forgetfulness was the most valuable cargo any pirate ship ever carried. If this story kept you watching, hit subscribe. I cover the hidden history behind everything the sea touched, from the ships to the storms to the men who sailed through both. And if you want to know what happened to the last pirate republic and the men who tried to build a country on stolen gold, that video is on screen now.